Hey there, it's Gayle with BERNINA of Naperville, and welcome to our first lesson of our Bloom and Grow Serge-a-long. I'm really excited about this because you are going to learn so many things with this program, and you're going to do a quilt, but I think a lot of these techniques that we're using, regardless if you're a quilter, an over quilter like me, or a garment sewist, I think there's something for you to find in this project. So the way that we're doing this here at BERNINA of Naperville is we have a kit put together that includes the pattern, the fabric, the thread, the BERNINA Skill Hub course, everything that you need to make this quilt except the batting and the backing. That you're going to pick out yourself. Now, I did mention the BERNINA Skill Hub course for Bloom and Grow because that is very detailed lessons presented by Mary Beck that will guide you through making this quilt all on your own. And honestly, you don't need yours truly. But what I feel we bring to the table with our presentation is I decided that I wanted to do my Bloom and Grow quilt as a quilt as you go because I wanted small enough pieces that I could experiment using my sewing machine, maybe even my embroidery machine, as well as the serger, and maybe even bring some of my serger elements into the actual quilting process as well. So we're going to do as much as we possibly can on the serger, but there is no way that you can let me loose in my sewing room with all of my fun machines and tools and not use all of them to their fullest, right? So be kind of ready for me to use some software, be ready for me to definitely use my BERNINA sewing machine, and maybe even my sit-down long arm. So what do you think? Well, you got to walk before you run. So this first lesson is all about getting your perfect 1/4 of an inch seam. Yes, you can do perfect 1/4 inch piecing on your BERNINA serger. And yes, I use the L890 regular edition or my BERNINA L890 Quilters edition here at the store that you see. But this particular technique you can do on any serger, BERNINA or Bernette. So that's right. Those of you that have an L850 out there or an L860 or even the BERNINA 460, you're going to be able to do this first lesson. So, gosh, you didn't know that, did you? You might have noticed as well, if you looked at the schedule for these classes, that I am going out of order from how the BERNINA team did theirs on their BERNINA Skill Hub courses. And that's just simply because I'm trying to take it from, let's just do the basics, like just serger basics, 4-thread, overlock stitch, right? See what that does, and then we'll build onto it as we go through these lessons. So once again, these videos that we do are here to assist you, but you're the creative force in your sewing room. So you can kind of take what BERNINA has put together, take what we've put together, and then kind of decide how you want to do it. Does that sound fair? And because we're going to be working with this month by month, well, you know what? You've got time to change your mind too, quite honestly. So let's get started and see what we're doing. Welcome to our first lesson in our Serge-a-long Bloom and Grow Serger Quilt project. And first of all, what you're looking at here is the interactive handout that you're going to receive when you purchase the Bloom and Grow kit. You may have already received this from me in an email if you've already signed up for the Bloom and Grow Serge-a-long, but if you have not yet made the decision to purchase the kit, this is what you're going to get. Now, the BERNINA of Naperville presentation decks or the interactive handouts, whatever you want to call them, are all interactive. So we actually have certain things linked. So for instance, our logo picture here is going to link to the BERNINA of Naperville website. The BERNINA Skill Hub logo links to the BERNINA Skill Hub. And this is where you're going to log in, create an account if you don't have one yet. And then you're going to find the Bloom and Grow class, use your access codes that you get when you purchase the kit from us, and log on. And in your welcome email for the Bloom and Grow Serger kit, you will have received or you will receive instructions on how to register and use your access codes on the BERNINA Skill Hub. If you're new to the BERNINA Skill Hub, and you haven't created an account or anything like that, and you get a screen similar to this, but it's blank, you can just click on the course catalog, and there you'll see the different courses. Now, when you click the log on button, You can either register for an account here, or you can sign in to your existing one. When you register for an account, you're going to make sure that you use the email that you are going to be checking and receiving information from, and you're going to select Register Now. You'll fill out a form, and then after you fill out that form, you're going to get a verification code sent to your phone or your email or whatever you chose to have the verification code sent to. So I already have an account, so I'm going to sign in. And you can see here, it's asking me for my verification code. And then you can go to either your dashboard or the previous page. I'm going to go to the previous page so that we can see the list of courses. We've already done a similar video on how to use your access codes and everything for our Bernina Building Blocks program. But as you can see here, there's the Bernina Bloom and Grow. Now, I want to make sure that you understand that you have already paid us for these classes, so please do not pay another $300 to Bernina. You're simply going to add this to your cart, going to go up to your shopping cart. You're going to say checkout. Yes, you want to continue with whoever you're signed in as. Here, we're going to continue to checkout, even though it's still showing up that we need to pay. Then you might have pop-ups blocked and you don't get this window, but this window comes up where we're going to add our promotional code. And that promotional code is the code that says your access code that you got in our Bernina of Naperville welcome email for your Bloom and Grow class. And you just click it here like this. You hit your code, and then you can place your order. And don't fill out your credit card information because this is the same as your credit card information. Once you pay and all of that, you're going to go to your dashboard, and you're going to see under My Courses that it's loaded your Bloom and Grow class under your courses here. And then sometimes it takes it a minute to download for the first time. And there's several different classes that you're going to go through. There's an introduction, and each little segment sometimes has more than one thing to look at. So if we launch the introduction, you'll scroll down and you'll have a review of all of the things that topic is going to cover. Then you'll have a video to watch. Then there's a summary of what you just watched. And then you click exit the lesson once you've completed an entire segment. Then there is project prep. And what you're looking at here are the items in the gift with purchase if you purchase the Bernina L890 Quilters Edition Serger. So you gather those supplies. Now, of course, you're getting a kit from Bernina of Naperville that has all of these items except for that bag and the feet. Those are sold separately. You go over the supplies in the supply list. And then here is an area where you can download the Bloom and Grow PDF and have like a digital copy of the pattern. And then you will also want to download the Bloom and Grow labels, because when you go through the cutting with Mary, she's going to show you how to cut and how to organize your fabrics as you go through each lesson. And then you can see here this little button as I scroll down to each one. I'm scrolling through these little guys there like that. And so that's how you're going to use this information. And I do want to remind you that we are not going in the same order. And I highly recommend that you watch the BERNINA Skill Hub courses first, just to get an idea of the project. And then you sew with me month by month. And you can choose to do the quilt as you go, or you can choose to assemble it, the final assembly, the way Bernina does it. We're going to start with some basics. So yes, you can piece, quilt, applique, and bind with your serger. And there's a lot of benefits for piecing. There's, the fact that you can use the sliding seam guide on your serger in conjunction with the cutting knife to provide a wall to keep you at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and make it perfectly accurate. You'll need to set the measurement and perform a test gauge, and we're going to show you how to do that in this month's lesson. The seams are finished, so you don't have any more weird threads that get underneath your quilt when you're trying to quilt it and they peek through. You know what I'm talking about, right? And it's faster because sergers stitch about 1,500 stitches per minute. And you can also piece with a cover stitch chain. And this is perfect for stitch and flip blocks. You stitch exactly on the drawn line. And yes, you can trim the excess fabric if your blade is engaged in chain piecing mode. Now, we're not going to do that in this lesson. We won't do that until lesson 3. But because you're trimming with the blade of your serger rather than multiple trips to the cutting mat, you're saving yourself a little bit of wear and tear on your body and time. There's differential settings that make sewing bias seams really easy because it prevents waving or stretching. And then the feeding system on a serger is more robust for long seams since the feed dogs are longer and the presser foot is longer. Another thing that you can do that is a benefit using a serger is that you can add new and interesting looking effects for texture and interest. There's flat lock seams, and those are almost reversible seams. You can make them look like satin stitch on the top and satin stitch on the back. That is a really cool technique, not only for adding to your quilt, but if you're ever making like banners out of like nylon fabric that need to be double-sided. There's cover stitch chain quilting, which looks very interesting on both the top and the back of the quilt, especially when you add decorative threads to the cover stitch looper. And then you can also quilt with your cover stitch looks, like the 4-thread cover and the 3-thread cover. And of course, 3-thread cover you can do wide or narrow. You can also add interesting looks and effects to applique pieces. So for instance, you can add rolled edgings or narrow edge edgings, or even applique these into place with a cover stitch chain. You can create binding. You can add a rolled hem to the edge of the binding to create a mock piping effect. You can create embellished prairie points to add that extra touch inside your binding. And you can bind with a wrapped edge, like think decorative threads wrapping the edge of your quilt rather than fabric. And then you can even do a traditional binding with a twist. So easily add fusible thread in the looper, and then you stitch your binding together with a chain stitch to join your long pieces, and then you're going to stitch the binding on with a 3-thread overlock, and that's going to flatten the edge perfectly, fill the edge that is tightly wrapped, and then when you wrap your binding around to the other side, the fusible thread is going to keep it in place indefinitely, but I like to sew mine down with a chain stitch. You could also use a chain stitch cover stitch to sew it down, or even if you wanted, you could do it by hand, because it's okay to mix techniques in a project like this. And then for more of these tips and tricks and inspirations, don't forget to check out the Serger Quilting and Tips for you to be the best over quilter you can be. And that is in the big book of Serger Quilting. And as you see right there, that's highlighted. That means that's a link that will take you to purchase this item if you choose so. So now with all of that out of the way, it's time for you to cut your Bloom and Grow Serger quilt. Now, I recommend that you cut based on Mary Beck's instructions that she gives you on the BERNINA Skill Hub. But just a little bit of housekeeping. Please note that the BERNINA of Naperville kitted kits, piece H, may not be one complete cut. You're going to have plenty of this print to complete your quilt without worry, but we just got like weird bolts when we kitted them, and we just were like, after cutting all the quilt kits and everything, you will determine that piece H you don't need in one continuous piece. So I have some tips for you, and I want to, this particular project that we're doing today, or this whole year-long project that we're doing, is not something where the sun is going to fall out of the sky if you don't cut your strips perfectly straight. However, if I'm going to teach you how to do precision 1/4-inch piecing, it always has to start with the cutting. So let's just talk a little bit about how a great quilt can go wrong no matter how accurate your seam allowances are. So the first thing I would recommend when you wash your fabric, if you do wash, don't let that happen. Serge your edges on your serger with your 4-thread overlock stitch, and it'll keep everything nice and neat. So I have pulled this piece of fabric out of my dryer. It was in there for exactly 8 minutes on low temperature. Then I'm going to press it the rest of the way dry, always going parallel to the selvage, the direction that my iron is moving. We don't want to go cross grain or we can stretch or distort the fabric. Then when I place it on my cutting board, I want to line those edges up, the selvages parallel, but I have to keep an eye on my fold to make sure that it's not wiggling and twisting, or else I'm not going to get a straight cut. And some of you might assume that when you get your fabric from the fabric store that it's been folded perfectly on the bolt crease and everything, but that doesn't happen. So that's why you have to really take the time to lay things out and get it nice and smooth on your cutting table, or else your strips could have that little bend in it. So another thing that can happen is if you fold not just, in half once, but if you fold in half, again, you have even more opportunities to get things just slightly off. So once you have your fabric nicely positioned and it's totally flat, you're going to have to trim and neaten your edges. And I do that simply by taking a ruler and aligning one of the lines on the bottom of the ruler with the fold of my fabric. But you don't want to cross your hands when you cut, and it's hard to keep the ruler straight on the edge of the fabric. So what I do is I stack my rulers. I use, in this case, my 8.5-inch ruler, and I get that aligned on the straight fold. And then I slide it over, and then I stack or butt my rulers up together so that I can remove that 8.5-inch ruler and make the cut with my rotary cutter. And now from this point forward, I can use this straight edge to make all of my cuts. So now that we've neatened our edges, it's time to get on with our lesson on getting perfect 1/4-inch seams. After you practice neatening the edges, you're going to choose 4 fabrics from your stash so that you can trim those for a straight edge on all 4 pieces. And then from each of those fabrics, you're going to cut 1.5 by 15-inch strip. Then you're going to go over to your overlocker and you're going to set it for a 4-thread overlock stitch with an integrated safety seam. Now, here's the really cool part about Lesson 1 and how we've adapted it. You can complete this lesson on any serger that has an overlock stitch. We're using the BERNINA LA90, but you could use any BERNINA overlocker or any Bernette for that matter. And then you're going to thread it with the white thread that came in your kit, which is the Metler 60 weight thread. And we're going to do that in all 4 paths, both needles and the upper looper and the lower looper. And then we're going to adjust our left tension to 4.5 to prevent the threads from showing. And that's called laddering. And if you watch the BERNINA Skill Hub videos, Mary tells you all about that. Okay, so it's time to make our test swatch to test our 1/4-inch seam. And unlike our sewing machine, our sergers don't really have a 1/4-inch foot or anything like that, and we can't really easily move our needle positions back and forth. I mean, we can take a needle out and put a needle in and all of that, but what I'm going to do is show you how to get a 1/4-inch from your 4-thread overlock stitch, and that's pretty easy. So we're going to take our strips, make sure that they're nice and straight, and then we're going to use our seam gauge, and we're going to be using the 1/4-inch side. Now, the way that this works is I'm using this 1/4-inch gauge to align it to the blade of my serger, the one that's going to be doing the cutting, and then we're going to adjust the cutting width until the edge of that 1/4-inch guide is lined up next to the left needle. We might not get this right the first time, but this is how we're going to do it. And then once I feel good that I probably got it in the ballpark somewhere, then I'm going to stitch my 4 strips together. And then you're going to measure. And I can look here by measuring my strip that I'm at about 4 3/8.
So what that means is that I have a sneaking suspicion that my 1/4 of an inch was not a 1/4 of an inch. It was too wide. And indeed, there it is. You can see my seam gauge there. As opposed to my stitching, it was way too wide. So I need to move my cutter closer to my needles, therefore making my cutting width narrower.
And one thing that might help you a lot is if after you get your seam gauge adjusted there, you're going to put on your seam guide and get that just in the right spot. And what you're going to be doing is moving your seam guide actually closer to your left needle so that when the needle comes down, it's just going to hit inside your 1/4 inch gauge.
So I cut 4 more pieces and stitched them together, and let's see if it works this time. Another thing that I like to do, honestly, when I'm lining up my gauge is I can't always see my little dot. So I'm marking where my left needle is there, right on my foot, and that's just going to give me a better idea of where I put my gauge. But now, as I'm stitching, I feel pretty confident that this is going to be the one. I hope. Let's see. All right, so going back to the iron, and also pressing is another crucial thing to make sure that everything is perfect. And you can notice I'm using my iron to fold my seams over to press to the side. And I usually try to press as I go with the grain line again on these. All right, so here's the moment of truth. Drum roll. Come on, let's see how this turned out. We're aiming for 4.5 inches, everyone. Because if it's less than 4.5 inches, your seam allowance is too wide. And if it's more than 4.5, it's too narrow. And by golly, that one is perfect. All right, so now that we've got our perfect 1/4 inch seam, it's time to put our skills to use by assembling the flower pot. So you're going to grab your gray 1.5 by 11 inch fabric B strip, and you're going to attach that to the 11.5 inch end of fabric M, which is 11.5 by 14.5 inch, and you're going to press to the skinny strip and set this piece aside until lesson 9. Now it's time to start stripping. Oh, stop it. I don't mean it like that. I mean strip piecing. So for the method that we did, I cut all of these strips, and according to the cutting instructions that Mary shows you how to do, right? And my special precautions to keep our pieces nice and straight. So I put all the strips in the bag and shake it up randomly and pulled out pairs. So sew those pairs and then sew those pairs together using this perfect 1/4 inch seam method. And this way we're making no changes to the overlock or adjustment. And then once again, just make sure that you sew these sets, these seams together should be sewn right sides together. So once you have your sets sewn together, from these sets, we're going to create our first round of fancy thread and such in our overlocker. And this is really exciting. So the machine setup is for a 3-thread wide overlock stitch. And that is stitch number 3. And no other adjustments really. I mean, simple, dimple. Let's go. And we're going to put teal or gray thread through our needle, and then our upper looper gets the teal glamour metallic, and the lower looper gets the light spaghetti. And always do a practice test first. I mean, I told you that I didn't need to make any adjustments at all, but it's always good, you know, when we have a kit like this, practice on that seam gauge you created. And then I did not have to use a thread cradle for this, but you may need to. So that's something to consider. And then once you've got your sets sewn together in this method, you're going to press the pieces, alternating the glamour thread showing and the spaghetti thread showing. Now we need to talk about assembly. So with your cutting, you cut your strip pieced fabric. And we're going to do that in the same manner that Mary does in her video. So please follow the Bernina Bloom and Grow Skill Hub class for exactly how to cut from this big piece of fabric that we've created. We're going to stitch ours together using the same stitch and the same process right down that diagonal line. Now, you may want to adjust your differential feed to just a little bit higher number than normal. And that's because sometimes on the bias, seams tend to wave. So if you need to, increase that maybe to like 1.1 just to help you out there. I've also switched my foot to the standard foot for sewing because that foot is longer and it's designed to go over a lot of seams because of how that little wire hits the foot in a special way. And I want you to watch the Bloom and Grow segment where Mary explains that too. So you can't just get by on good old Gayle's videos here, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so stitch our half square triangles together. Now they're going to be much larger than our other squares that are cut just simply from our serger fabric. So we're going to square these up to 8.5 inches. And then we're going to assemble these blocks in like a 4-patch fashion. And then once you have one 4-patch, you're going to set that aside. And then you're going to assemble the others and then sew those 2 4-patches together. And I like to press my seams so that they nest together, or as I affectionately call it, snuggle butting. And this really helps get those seams locked and perfect when you're stitching. And then once you've completed this, we're going to quilt it in our next lesson. So our next lesson premieres Friday, June 7th at 10 a.m. And we're going to be doing quilting on our strip piece block using our straight line ruler work technique with the 72S ruler work foot, the one with the slit, and then also doing some big meandering using the number 73 adjustable open toe foot and the every angle ruler. Now, some of you may not have access to a Q series like I do, so you can also perform these tasks on your sit down Bernina. And if you don't feel comfortable with free motion, well, you can use your walking foot or your dual feed.
All right, thank you so much for watching. I can't wait to quilt what we made this month next month. How about you? It's going to be cool. We're going to be using ruler work quilting on a Bernina sit-down Q16 on a folding table. If you don't have one of those machines, you can certainly do ruler working on your regular sewing machine, no problem. All right? All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. It's not too late to order your kit if you have not purchased this yet. So make sure you check out BERNINAofNaperville.com and search for the Bloom and Grow Serge-a-long, and you can order your kit, and we will send it out to you as quickly as we get all of the supplies for it. Thank you so much for watching, and check us out on our Bernina of Naperville YouTube channel, which is easy to find because it is youtube.com/Bernina of Naperville, and there you can like, comment, and subscribe. All right, only 11 more lessons to go.